Hello, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. We tested this in advance, but one can never be certain. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you may be joining us from in the world today. My name is Rachel Datlow. I'm the Senior Customer Enablement Program Manager here at Instabase, and it's my exceptional pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. One, today's session will be recorded and shared with attendees, so you'll be able to share it with colleagues and rewatch as needed. Second, please don't hesitate to use the Q&A function to submit feedback throughout today's presentation. I've also got a couple of our Instabase product experts waiting backstage to answer all of your burning inquiries, and we'll be addressing Q&A live towards the end of today's session. Third, while today's webinar is going to focus on some exciting new enhancements to the AI Hub experience, you might have more general questions about the platform. If that's the case, again, just smash that Q&A button and we will happily give you some fantastic Instabase fundamentals resources. Now, without further ado, I am so excited to introduce you to the two chaps who will be leading today's session, our technical trainer, Brian Cho, and sales engineer, Hamish Campbell. Take it away, guys.
Hey, thanks so much for that introduction, Rachel. So I'm Brian, and today I'll be leading with my co-presenter. I'll let him introduce himself. I'm the technical trainer here at Instabase, and it says that I love cats. This is true. I have two of them at home. Hopefully they won't interrupt the webinar today, but if they do, then consider it a gift. And then also love cars, which I think will explain some of the demos that we might see today. And so, just very excited to be here. And with that, I'll pass it off to my co-presenter to introduce themselves. Thanks.
Thanks, Brian. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all. So my name's Hamish. I'm one of the engineers here at Instabase. I'm based in London. And as Rachel said, I am an Ironman finisher. That's not a fair representation of my current fitness levels. It's definitely worse than that. But yeah, excited to be here today and to get started. So let's hop into it then, Brian, if you want to advance the slides. Great. So in terms of the agenda for today, what we're going to do at the start is just start with a session overview. So I'm going to go over the theme of what we're going to be covering, some of this kind of process of how we're going to talk about all of the new features that have come out in this newest release, 24.32. And then I'm also just going to spend a few minutes talking about the AI Hub platform. I'm conscious that some people will have used AI Hub quite a bit and will be quite expert on the platform. And also we might have some new faces here that haven't experienced a lot of AI Hub before. Then what we'll do is start diving into the features. We're going to focus on three main features today that are found within the build workflow. For each of those features, I'll talk a little bit about what the feature is and why we've decided to add it to the platform. And then Brian's going to take you through an actual demonstration on some documents showing you how you can make best use of that feature. Then we're going to do a bit of an improvements overview, take you through the whole suite of additions that have been added, and then there'll be some time for Q&A at the end. So as Rachel mentioned, please do put in some questions into the chat and the team will feed us those questions at the end. Great, so if you can advance the slides, please, Brian. Great, and one more. So in terms of how we're going to talk through each of these features, we're going to structure the conversation using three main points. So the first is what? What is the new feature and what does this mean for building solutions? This is going to be a bit of a zoomed out view. Then we're going to give you a bit of insight into why we've added this functionality. Typically, it's because businesses that we work with and customers that we work with day in, day out have been asking for these features. And then finally, we're going to look at the how. And that's where Brian's going to come in and show you some worked examples, and we'll add some color into how best to use these features that have been added to the platform. Great, so just to take a zoomed out approach, what is AI Hub if this is the first time you are encountering it? The main thing to consider is that there are three main workflows. As I mentioned today, we're going to be focusing on many of the features that are coming to build. So build is our document processing workflow. Generally, this is useful when you're receiving a large volume of documents, and the kinds of information you want to pull out of those documents is very similar each time. So it allows you to build repeatable workflows to get repeatable extractions and structure that data really nicely. Then we've got content querying. This is the converse workflow. And this is useful for more ad hoc queries. So when you want to ask different questions on the fly, you want different pieces of information out, potentially very long, but a smaller number of documents, this is going to be the place where you'll use converse. And then finally, we've got enterprise search. And this was kind of announced and launched earlier this month. So you can go on our website and find some more information there and sign up to a wait list on that as well. But today, a lot of the features we'll be walking you through will be on build. Great, so we can get started with the first feature now. So the first one is processing of emails and attachments. So typically how this worked before was if a customer had a use case where they were pulling in documents over email, maybe some information was within the email body, and then we had some more attachments attached to the email. They would have had to download that or have a script to pull down all that information separately, upload each file to AI Hub one by one, and then these would get classified and the relevant extractions would happen. Now what we've been able to add to the platform is actually the ability to download a .eml file. So download one file, upload it to AI Hub, and then on that upload process, all of the attachments and the email body are going to be broken out into the relevant classes of documents so that each set of extractions can be applied to each part of that email or the attachment that's necessary. So why have we done this? Well, a lot of our customers are already using email integration. The difference is that a lot of them have had to do this work before using Instabase. And so what we're bringing now is more of a formal integration, allowing them to do this in a much lower friction process within Instabase. Why this is going to be useful long term is that this is the first step, it's really the stepping stone to allow us to add full scale integration with common email inboxes. So things like Outlook, things like Gmail, that you'll simply be able to select when you're deploying solutions into production and putting those solutions live. So without further ado, I'll pass over to Brian, who can really bring this to life just now through an example.
Awesome. Thank you, Hamish. Yeah, let's take a look at what that actually looks like to upload and work with emails that have attachments, right, in platform. And so before I do that, I actually want to just dive in and show you the platform just at a high level. So here's our homepage in AI Hub. So this is something to just get familiarized with. And so without further ado, we're going to hop into an existing app. And so, yeah, let's say we have an email, right? And let's say for this example, Hamish has sold me a car and, I love that car. And now I'm going to try and get some financing for it. So I'll be talking with the lender. I'll show you more details in a bit what that email looks like. But essentially, I have an email with some attachments. And let's say the lender wants to run that through this vehicle sale and financing app. So in order to run that email, essentially all we need to do is click Run App, choose our file, and you might be able to see this here. Hopefully you can. But I have a email file right here. It's a .eml. And so we just choose that one. And again, this is an email that has attachments on it. And this is one file. I've uploaded that. And now I've hit run. And so while we wait for this to actually go and get processed by our app, I want to go ahead and show you the email just to set some context. So hopefully we can see this. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. But this is an email that I've totally not sent to myself. This was sent to me by one Bill Cashman, who is a technical lender at a company called Instabanks. And they're congratulating me on the purchase of this vehicle, but we need to collect some documents, right, to secure financing. So we've got a driver's license being requested and some financial, like income verification forms, and then a copy of a bill of sale, which is essentially a document that contains information about the seller, the buyer, and the vehicle itself. And so now I've gone ahead and replied to Bill Cashman, right? I've said, hey, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and send these to you right now in this email, and I'm going to attach copies of these documents that you asked for. And so zooming out a little bit, we can see that we actually have these attachments, right? I've got a W-2, and I've also got a driver's license, I've got a pay stub, and I've got this bill of sale, which again, we'll take a look at a little closer in a bit. And so this is essentially the file that I've uploaded, is this email right here. So going back, let's take a look at this run, which we can now see is completed. So we can click that run and see what happened. So as you can see, we have this email here on the left, right? It's tagged email. And this was automatically classified, by the way. But we've got this email, and on the right, we have also got some extractions, right? We've got some insights that we've configured. In this case, we have a bullet point summary about the email. And then as we go through, we start to see these attachments that were included as well. And keep in mind, right, I've only uploaded one file, which was that .eml file. So we have this W-2, right, which is an income verification type of document here in the US. We've got a driver's license. And again, we've got some extractions here, right? We've got the name, we've got a last name, a date of birth, so on and so forth. And we've got the rest of these documents as well, right? This bill of sale. And finally, we have this pay stub. So hopefully that shows and illustrates how to upload emails that have attachments and how easy it can be. And with that, I'll pass it back to Hamish to cover the next feature.
Thanks, Brian. I think that's a great example. So the next feature is OCR confidence. So for those of you that don't know what an OCR is basically a piece of technology that reads the content on the document and pulls off any text information that is found there. Now, in some situations, that text information is going to be very legible and easy to read. And in other situations, it's going to be very hard to read. So if you imagine messy handwriting or potentially a blurred photo, we see this often if customers are uploading their own documents via an image that they've taken on their phone. For example, in insurance claims, this is quite common. What we're now introducing into the platform is actually the ability to validate your extractions based on that OCR confidence. So this is really going to be useful. And the reason we brought this feature out is because customers want more tools to enable them to have high trust in those extractions that they've got, particularly when dealing with handwriting or submitted claims coming from pictures taken by their users themselves. And long term, what this is going to allow us to do is combined with other techniques such as language facilities. So we're able to deal with many languages on AI Hub platform, including some more niche ones, things like kind of Hindi and Hebrew. Combined with those other technologies, we now have a suite to deal with a lot of different types of text and handwriting, all in the AI Hub platform. Great. So Brian, if you want to take us through an example of this now, I think this is going to be really useful.
Yeah, thank you. Let's take a look at OCR confidence and what that looks like. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hop back into that app that we had just demoed for the email ingestion, how to work with that. And we're going to dive into that configuration. So let me just switch to that. So this is what we just looked at, right? So hopefully this is a little bit familiar. Let's actually go in to the app itself, and we're going to edit the configurations to better understand OCR confidence, how that works, why it's helpful. So before I dive in, so we have a mixed audience here. Some folks here have probably seen or worked with AI Hub. Others, this might be the first time. So just a quick overview on what fields are and how to create one. So let's take a look at this driver license class. So there's a class that we've defined for each of the different types of documents that we expect this app to process. So I think driver's licenses are pretty ubiquitous, easy to understand. So let's try to understand what's going on here. So here, this driver license has a first name, right? We have the name of the person. And so obviously there's also a last name. And we can see that we've actually extracted this here, right? We've got a first name, we've got a last name. Let's actually take a look at what it looks like, how we're going to actually define things like this. So let's say, for example, we want to extract this issue date. To do that, we just go ahead in the driver license class, click add field, and then we want to use at this point natural language to describe what it is that we're looking for. So we can go ahead and say something like issue date. And then keep in mind there are a number of different field types that you can use here. And in this case, we'll just go ahead and use text extraction because we just want to extract the text off the page. And we see that we have a result. So hopefully that helps to shed some light and is a reminder to some folks here as well on how fields work. And so with that, we can dive into actually talking about OCR confidence. And to do that, I want to look at these types of documents here, the bill of sale. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. But essentially, this document contains information about the vehicle being sold. In this case, Hamish has sold me a vintage 911. Thank you so much. At a good price, by the way. And then it has information about the seller, which is Hamish, and then about me. And don't go looking this up because this is all fake. So just keeping that in mind, let's take a look at some of these fields. So here we have the vehicle details, and we also have the seller name. We also have my name and some other information. So OCR confidence. Let's take a look at the seller name on this very, very clean, right? Machine readable, nice and printed, crispy text, right? Hamish is right here. If I go ahead and click edit, we actually can see that we have some scores, right? And namely, we have the OCR confidence score. So what does that mean? I think to better understand what this means, we need to look at another version of this, or maybe it's a little less crispy, or maybe my handwriting wasn't that great. So coming here again, this is the exact same thing, right? Same form, but this time I've actually written this myself. And yeah, my handwriting is not the best. And so we can see that here for Hamish's name, there's some ambiguity going on here. And we actually get a result of Hamish, which is not how you would say Hamish's name. And the reason being is that, again, it's a little bit illegible, a little bit ambiguous. And so we have this OCR confidence score that went from 90 something down to 67%. So OCR confidence is essentially how confident the models are that are responsible for transcribing or digitizing or basically interpreting, right, what it's seeing, how confident it is that this is correct. So in this case, the C is a little bit ambiguous. Is that a C or is that an S? We're not really sure, right? And so that's why we get this score. So it's something that we have available for users to better understand how their models are performing, how their solutions are performing, and what they might be able to do to improve results or maintain good results. So hopefully that makes sense. And with that, I'll pass it back to Hamish.
Thanks, Brian. And then the last of our features that we're going to do a bit of a deep dive on is the custom function fields addition that we've got here. So what is this feature? Essentially, what this feature allows you to do is combine one or multiple different extracted fields into another derived field. So that allows you to do things like combining rules. We've seen examples in the past where we want to take some extracted fields, apply some logic, and then also export the result along with those extracted results when those rules have been applied. That's now going to be possible within AI Hub. And the other thing you can do is things like derived results. So in this example, what I've done here is taken the date of birth from a passport and then calculated the age based on the current date. So you'd be able to get more sort of derived results from the raw extracted results that you're doing within AI Hub. In the future, what we're working on as well is actually making this prompt-based. So currently this relies on some Python logic to be able to code up these custom functions. In the future, what we're looking to bring is actually the ability to prompt the model to create this functionality for you without having to need or without needing the kind of expertise to code out this functionality by hand. Great. So Brian, if you want to show this one as well, that would be great.
Yeah, let's go for it. So custom function fields, we'll take a look, and thankfully we'll be looking at driver's licenses. So let's take a look. So again, we're back in that configuration, right? And in this case, we're not going to look at bill of sale. Let's take a look at a driver's license. So as Hamish mentioned, right, we can use other fields and we can transform them. So I actually have that same example here of calculating the age, and we can take a look at this. So to get the current age, we are defining a field that's called current age or age, right? And then for the field type, instead of using the text extraction that you saw before, this time we're going to use that new custom function field. And so as the description says here, right? It's used to compute values or even send these values to other third-party external locations. So we will go ahead and calculate that or select that. And then here we can go ahead and we can add some code that can actually go ahead and make those changes, right? So we can take the date, for example, and we can go ahead and compare that to some other date. And then we can say, hey, based on today's date, how old is this person? So that's something that we can do. And it looks like I've overwritten the function accidentally, but we have some other examples to look at. So here's another example. Let's say we want to do something maybe a little bit more simple, and we want to go ahead and maybe append this first name that we've extracted, right? Just as a reminder, this was a pretty vanilla, hey, let's use natural language and ask for first name. And the same
I think you're on mute, Brian. It looks like you're on mute, Brian.
All right, guys, Rachel here again. We're going to pause for just a moment while Brian handles some technical difficulties. And in the meantime, I'm going to pass it back to Hamish.
Thanks, Rachel. What I'll do is try and share my screen just now. And then what I'll do is actually just walk through those other features that we've got coming out in this release. So it looks like I can't actually get screen control since Brian still has it. So what I'll do is actually just talk through these for now. So the first one that we're bringing to the platform is actually quite a big quality of life improvement, and this is going to be auto-saving. So what this means is in a build project, much like Brian's showing just now, previously what you had to do was go through each field, and when you make changes, actually manually save those fields. Now what's going to happen is as you make changes to the project, in real time, those saves are going to be added to the project. And so compared to how we used to have to do this, this is a much simpler way of creating a project and ensures that if your browser shuts down unexpectedly or your laptop runs out of charge or something, that actually these saves are automatically going to be saved to the AI Hub platform. Then the second change is going to be to do with Excel files. So we see this a lot, particularly in the insurance space, that we get large Excel files. And typically how we used to deal with these in the past was actually to convert them to a PDF and then read them much like any other file that we would have. Now what we can do is actually handle these natively. So this means that we have the capacity to read each cell on the Excel file within AI Hub, which means that we don't lose as much information and we can keep that natural structure that we get with Excel files to be able to manipulate that data and get those extractions working much better first time. Another feature that we've been working on is actually scalability. So we find a lot of the time when you're working on production use cases, particularly with large enterprises, that it's important to have, for example, a large number of classes that are possible or a large number of fields that we can add to each class. And so we've been kind of beefing out the AI Hub platform, allowing these use cases to be handled. And a lot of these advancements are coming now, but also in the next few months, we're going to be increasing those allowances as well. Another quality of life improvement that you might have seen if you're already working on the AI Hub platform is actually that we have faster extractions now. So particularly in build, we're seeing around about 2 times faster extraction rate. And again, this really helps with both developing your solution and configuring that solution in the development process, but also when you put it into production, being able to deal with more kind of real-time applications that require that faster latency time as well. Another one is actually on Converse. So I know we've done a lot of focus on build so far, but actually in Converse, one of the new features we've brought out is the ability to automatically switch between models. So previously you had to select each model that you wanted to use, and sometimes that meant that you didn't pick a powerful enough model to be actually able to complete the task that you wanted. And so now what we're able to do is to understand the task that you're asking for, look at the length of the documents and the number of documents that you're going to be querying against, and then automatically assign a model that's going to be able to deal with that query as best as possible. And then the final one, apart from the 3 that we've done in depth.
No,
sorry, were you saying something?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but that automatic model selection is probably the one that I am by far the most excited about. Of all the things we've got coming down the pipeline, it's major.
Brilliant, thanks, Rachel. And then the final one there is actually date time awareness. So particularly in Converse, you might have noticed that if you extract a date and you want to understand, is that date in the past or is it in the future? Now the models are actually going to have that information available to them. So you'll be able to ask those questions and get accurate answers. Previously, how you had to do this was actually to seed your prompt with that information by passing the current date or time to the model with that query. So I think combined with those 3 features that we've covered in depth there, and then also those other ones that I've mentioned, there's a lot coming every 2 weeks to the AI Hub platform. And what you'll see is every 2 weeks that platform updating and new additions being released. And you can always check out the release notes that we've got on the documentation page to keep up to date with what's coming out on the platform. So with that, Rachel.
Sorry, I was just going to ask, as those updates roll out, is there anything users need to do to sort of install those updates, as it were, like I would if an app update came through for my phone, or is that something that automatically is available to users?
Yeah, great question. So it depends on the configuration. For the vast majority of users, so all community users and any commercial users that we have on AI Hub, those updates are going to automatically arrive in the platform. So there's nothing you have to do, and those changes will be updated. Of course, we put checks in place to make sure that any updates aren't going to break existing solutions. So you don't have to worry about updating your solutions as the platform updates. You'll simply just see these new features arriving in the platform. For some of our enterprise customers, these upgrades will be more kind of cherry picked, and you should speak to the Instabase colleagues that you work with to understand those upgrade processes better as well.
Excellent, thank you.
Great, so I think that was pretty much everything we were going to cover. We're coming up around about to the half hour, so maybe we'll open the floor for questions, Rachel.
That sounds excellent. Let me pop into the Q&A here. We've had so many questions come through. We so appreciate your active feedback throughout this session, and a few that we think will really apply to the larger audience. The first one I'll read here says, what are out-of-the-box integrations that AI Hub will have with email providers? This question was actually submitted by a few folks, so it seems to be a popular one, Hamish.
Yeah, great question. I'm not surprised this one has come up at all. So as I mentioned, what we've got in the platform today to be able to upload a .eml file, break that out into attachments, that's going to be available straight away. And as long as you download the file as a .eml, that's going to work right off the bat without any issues. In terms of long-term integration with mailboxes, so we would do that through deployments. If you're not familiar with deployments, that's essentially how we put a solution into production. So once you've configured a solution, you make an app, then you make a deployment, and that allows you to pull in upstream and downstream integrations. Those upstream integrations, one of the first things we're going to be at is those mailbox or those inboxes for email. So the main ones that we're targeting are Gmail and Outlook, because those are generally the big providers that we see from our customers. But we're always looking for more suggestions. So if there's any particular inboxes that you're using that you would like to see in the platform and to be integrated, feel free to pop it in the Q&A as well there.
Great. I'll keep an eye on the Q&A in case we get any follow-up. Next question. You've covered a lot of features today, but are there some that we need to enable as opposed to features that will just be available there for us to use? And this is actually a two-part question. The second part of that question is, and do any of those features cost anything additional to our contract?
Great question. So I guess this is sort of hard to attack because there's so many features that we could talk about here. In general, there's no enabling of features that you need to do. So when you're working on any of the workflows, so converse or build in the platform, you'll simply see, like as Brian showed, a kind of drop-down menu. So that will give you the option for which extraction type you want to use. Also within build, there's things like more advanced models. So if you find that you're not getting the answers that you're hoping for, you can always toggle those advanced models. Some of those features will cost differently. So for example, if you use that advanced model, that has a pricing implication, but largely the pricing is fairly easy to structure. So any field that you're adding to your build project is going to be charged the same way. And you can find all that pricing information on the website.
Thank you. Next question. Awesome webinar. Thank you for the compliment. Awesome webinar. But where do I get more information after today if this recording is not enough? Seems like a great chance for us to pitch the doc site.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say this is what the enablement team has been working hard on. My first port of call is always the documentation site. So maybe we can pop that in the chat for people to take a look at. Alternatively, how you can get there, I can actually share my screen. This is generally how I get there. It's the easiest way for me to remember. So let me just share my screen. Yeah. So what you can do when you're on AI Hub is actually just hit this little book icon. If you hit this book icon, you're going to see all of this documentation around how to use AI Hub with all the different tabs ranging from kind of getting started to more advanced ways of using the product. One of the newish things is actually visual guides. So as you work through the different topics, you're going to see some of these guides that allow you to kind of get a step-by-step view of how to complete tasks. So rather than having to kind of sift through all this text documentation, you can see visually. And I personally find this a much easier way to learn. And then the final piece of the puzzle is really the API and SDK information. So once you've built your solution through the user interface on AI Hub, most of our customers are going to package that up into an app or a deployment that they then want to call via API. And that's going to allow them to integrate that solution into their existing software systems. And when you do that, of course, there's a lot of considerations. You need to understand the technicalities of how to call that solution. All of that information can be found in this documentation page. Is there anything else you wanted to add there, Rachel?
No, the only thing I would add there is that the doc site requires no sort of credential or login. It's open, free, and available for anyone to use at any time. You don't need to have any sort of password or username set up to access that. So please don't hesitate. And Hamish, as you pointed out, those step-by-step visual guides are really, I think, pretty fantastic in terms of streamlining what your Instabase experience looks like. Excellent. Okay, let me peek in the Q&A just one more time here to see what else we've had come through in the past couple of minutes. I've gotten some pings, but I haven't had a chance to look at them because you and I have been chatting through some of these features. Okay, I see here a question about custom functions. It says custom functions use Python to build. Is there a limitation to what we can use these for? I know this might be getting a little bit deep in the weeds, Hamish, for today's webinar. So if you think this is something better suited to an offline conversation, we can do that too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's layers to this question, really. So again, first port of call, I'd always recommend looking at the documentation site. I haven't looked at this specific section, but I suspect some of the kind of limitations are listed there. Just to give you a kind of peek behind the scenes of what's going on here from a technical standpoint, essentially this is a Lambda function that's running in the background. So a lot of the libraries, the common libraries that you'll use when writing these custom functions are already going to be available, and you just have to import them. There are some limitations, with kind of loading up your own libraries and installing them. So good to be aware of. But I have to say, when I've been building solutions, I'm yet to encounter a library that I haven't been able to access. So in general, yeah, most stuff's going to be possible, including calling external APIs, running regexes, whatever you need to do. But if there's some specifics you're running into issues with, feel free to kind of reach out to the team or again, take a look at the documentation site would be my recommendation.
Great, thank you. And just to follow up on that, things like that can be a little bit in the weeds for some folks. Is something like Python really necessary for me to know in order to successfully use AI Hub?
Yeah, this is a great question as well. So I would say in general, no, you don't have to be, you definitely don't have to be an expert on Python. I definitely would say that I'm not an expert on Python. At least to get started with AI Hub, most of the tools we have for building extractions, especially in Converse where there's no Python at all, you simply just need to use natural language. So it's pretty easy to get started. Having said that, some of the more advanced features for kind of getting your solutions into production, such as writing custom validation functions. So if, for example, you were going to do a logical check, a common one would be taking a payslip and checking whether the net pay equals the gross pay, take away deductions. You're going to do something like that, then you would require some understanding of Python. But it's not complex. So there's always tools out there that can help you with this. We also have prompt-based validations in the platform. So this is where you can basically instruct the large language models that we've got there, describing the kind of test or the kind of code you want to build. And then we will actually build that for you. And then all you have to do is run the checks and check whether that code is sufficient. And then finally, the other thing is we're actually going to be bringing this hopefully to the platform quite soon, is instead of writing those Python functions, you'll be able to do this prompt-based for also those derived fields. And it's also worth mentioning there's plenty of resources online for getting started with Python, even some kind of code generation websites out there. So lots of options available.
Awesome, thank you. That's exactly the answer that I was hoping to hear. That just about wraps us up today. If you submitted a question and we haven't answered it here in the live chat with Hamish and I, or in the live text Q&A, stay tuned. We will be reaching out to you. You will be hearing from us. Otherwise, thanks again for joining us today, for rolling with us through a couple of those technical glitches. A big shout out to Hamish and Brian, who've done such a fantastic job introducing us to some new and pretty exciting features. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.